Exploring the cultural significance of shells in the Marshall Islands, an assessment of the overusage of ornamental shells. What are ornamental shells? For your information, ornamental shells are shells that are exploited for their whole decorative value, whether as souvenir items or trade. But before we begin, we would like to thank CMI for providing the space and research utilities in the production of this project. Not forgetting to thank the Marine Science Program for supporting this project. Most specifically our MVP, Marine Science Program Coordinator, the man, the legend, Kendall Romani. Also we'd like to thank ourselves for not dying in the process of this report making. Now to begin, the distinctive cultural practices of many societies might be enthralling. To be exact, the Marshall Islands are a group of islands in the Pacific Ocean. The Marshallese people have a rich culture that is inextricably linked to their environment and history. In this evaluation, the cultural value of shells in Marshallese culture, the overuse of ornamental shells, and the significance of cultural preservation and sustainability in the Marshall Islands will be discussed. What made us investigate this topic in the first place was that we wanted to know how have cultural attitudes and perceptions of ornamental shell usage in the Marshall Islands evolved over time in response to environmental degradation and the scarcity of these shells. In fact, this research question examines the changing attitudes and perceptions of cultural significance of shells in the Marshall Islands, in response to the issue of overusage and its impact on the environment. It seeks to uncover the underlying socio-cultural factors and trends that have contributed to the current situation, and to identify potential avenues for addressing this issue through changes in cultural practices and attitudes. For that we came to a hypothesis that if there is an increasing scarcity of ornamental seashells in the Marshall Islands, we hypothesize that cultural attitudes towards their use and value may be changing, with a growing appreciation for their environmental significance and the need to conserve them. Due to this reasoning, we expect that this shift in cultural attitudes may be driven by increasing awareness of the impact of overcollection on the marine ecosystems and the importance of maintaining a sustainable balance between traditional cultural practices and environmental conservation. We also hypothesize that this shift in cultural attitudes may be more evident among younger generations, who may be more likely to prioritize environmental sustainability over traditional cultural practices. However, to achieve this goal, we must achieve the following objectives. 1. Identify which ornamental shells are overused/exploited from their natural habitats. 2. Find whether the process of extracting/harvesting ornamental shells is harmful or sustainable to the environment. 3. See if the possibility of recycling shells from old anemones can become an alternative option in rehabilitating an environment. 4. Have an ecological assessment on the environments in which these shells are existing. 5. Propose more alternative measures and policies in utilizing ornamental shells. The aim of project is to spread awareness about the overuse of ornamental shells. Additionally, suggest a more eco-friendly approach to the use of ornamental shells with the implementation of new regulations and policies, while at the same time, to protect the traditional practices of ornamental shells. Our form of investigation and methodology of our project would to conduct baseline surveys. These surveys will be done through interviews and questioning from the anemone businesses on the process of importing and exporting ornamental shells. Also, to quantify, using ecological surveying methods, the shell resources that are extracted from the ecosystems. And lastly, conduct socio-population survey. These surveys the people on the importance of anemone shells in the RMI. Material needed for this assessment would to have methods of baseline surveys, along with the questions for interviews and socio-population survey. After all of our endeavors, we complied the data and came to our results. From our baseline survey, we conducted an interview with 2 of our local anemone stores. Findings: 1. Harvesting of ornamental shells and sold as anemones in a year: Kauri 37.2%, Libuk 30.1%, Libukwi 19.5%, Libuk, Barora 11.5%, Will 1.8% ECT 0.1%. Findings: 2. Source of income revenue from ornamental shells of anemone businesses: 44.7% tourists, 21.3% overseas. 34% local. Next, from our ecological survey, findings are inclusive, none of the source of harvesting are located on island. As for our socio-population survey, after surveying 100 people on questions of the importance of ornamental shells, the first question on, does ornamental shells represent the cultural significance or the environmental significance of the Marshall Islands? 34.5% of the group chose environmental while 65.5% chose cultural. Then on our second question on, do you think the process of harvesting ornamental shells harms the environment they are extracted from? 51% said no and 49% yes. Many of those who answered no was because if the production of Amimona is blooming, the extraction of its shells is not harming the environment. As of our third question, if it were to come to choose either to implement sustainable practice of shell harvesting, possibility of no harvesting, or continue the process of utilizing ornamental shells in the present day, which will you choose? 42.7% chose sustainable practice while present day's practice 57.3%. On to discussing matters arising, we found that of our 100 survey participants, 19% are aware or have some form of knowledge on the process of harvesting ornamental shells or the shells in general, while 81% are not. Whilst at the same time, 96% of ornamental shells sold in Amimona shops are never recycled. Although there is no evidence on the harmful impacts of present day's methods of extracting and exploiting ornamental shells affect the environment it originated from, the production and consumer rate for this source of revenue has become concerning. Also, the alternatives of sustainable practices and methods of harvesting ornamental shells has not been considered even with the rising export rates. While consumer and production rates rise, the people themselves are not aware of how this situation can become a national threat to the future generations of this nation. Looking back, we had a lot of limitations and challenges in conducting this research. Some of the limitations of the proposed research include: 1. Limited access to reliable data and information on the cultural significance of shells in the Marshall Islands, as well as their usage patterns and environmental impact. 2. The potential to miss some nuances in cultural attitudes and perceptions of shell usage due to the inherent complexity of cultural practices and values. 3. The potential for biases in the data collection and analysis process due to the subjective nature of cultural attitudes and perceptions. 4. The challenge of identifying appropriate methodologies for the collection and analysis of cultural data, particularly in the context of the Marshall Islands, where traditional cultural practices may be closely tied to religious beliefs and practices. If there ever be any continuation of this project, we'd like to recommend on the following. 1. Conduct a comprehensive literature review to gain a deeper understanding of the cultural significance of shells in the Marshall Islands and to identify relevant empirical studies, case studies, and policy reports that can inform the proposed research. 2. Develop a cross-disciplinary research team including cultural anthropologists, marine biologists, and environmental scientists to provide expertise in the different aspects of the research. 3. Utilize participatory and qualitative research methods, including interviews, focus groups, and cultural observation, to engage with the local community and gather their insights into the issues surrounding the overusage of ornamental shells. 4. Incorporate local knowledge and perspectives into the research design, analysis, and interpretation of the data, as well as in the development of effective interventions and solutions. 5. Ensure that the proposed research is aligned with the principles of indigenous knowledge and wisdom, and that the research team has the necessary expertise and sensitivity to engage with the local community and its cultural practices. 6. Collaborate with local and national agencies, non-governmental organizations, and communities to ensure that the proposed research is relevant and responsive to the needs and priorities of the communities involved. 7. Use innovative, participatory methods to engage the local community and gather data, such as digital surveys, photo essays, and multimedia storytelling. 8. Develop a plan for the dissemination and communication of the research findings to stakeholders, including government agencies, communities, and scientific communities, and develop actionable recommendations to guide future policy and practice. 9. Ensure that the proposed research is conducted ethically and in alignment with the principles of indigenous knowledge and wisdom. This includes ensuring that the research is culturally appropriate, involving local communities in the research design and implementation, respecting cultural protocols, and obtaining informed consent for all research activities. 10. Incorporate a gender-inclusive approach to the research design and implementation by including women and girls, whose voices may be underrepresented in the topic area, and by considering the gender dynamics that may impact cultural attitudes and practices surrounding shell usage. In conclusion, the Marshall Lace people have a unique and rich culture that is deeply rooted in their environment and history. The use of shells in traditional practices and ceremonies is an important part of their culture, but the overuse of ornamental shells has had a significant impact on the environment. Preservation efforts for Marshall Lace culture and the environment are crucial to ensuring the sustainability of the islands and the well-being of the Marshall Lace people. The Marshall Lace government has taken steps to address the overuse of shells and promote sustainable practices, but more needs to be done to ensure the long-term preservation of Marshall Lace culture and the environment. Finally, it is our responsibility to respect and appreciate the cultures and environments we encounter. The use of shells in traditional practices and ceremonies is an important part of their culture, but the overuse of ornamental shells has had a significant impact on the environment. By doing so, we can promote cultural preservation and sustainability and ensure that future generations can continue to learn from and appreciate the unique traditions and practices of the Marshall Lace people. For more information, check out our works cited page. Thank you.